everyone. I'm Gary Nolan. I'd like to welcome you to our program. Today, continuing with our special series on Investigative Report in Health and Nutrition Issues, we're looking at fluoride, major problem for a lot of people. Unfortunately, with all the good science that seems to exist on the subject of fluoride, you would think that there would have been a great deal of interest to get it out of our water supply. Well, that hasn't been the case. We have to ask why. And what can we do to change that? All that coming up in just a moment. Normally we begin our program with about 5 minutes of health and nutrition information. However, due to the nature of today's program with a very large panel of experts, I thought it would be more appropriate to go directly to the issue at hand. To start our forum on the subject of fluoride, and by the way, most of the people listening to this program today, if they're drinking municipal water, are drinking fluoridated water, is Dr. John Yamianis. Dr. Yamianis is just finished a book with Dr. Peter Duesberg called AIDS. He has also authored a book on fluoride and aging, and he was one of the first of the mainstream scientists who, after looking at the research on fluoride, questioned its safety and efficacy. He's here now. We're going out to Ohio, where he's standing by to share his thoughts. Welcome to the program, Dr. Yamianis.
Thank you, Gary.
Let's assume for a moment that people in this audience have not been aware of the health movement's efforts to inform the public on the issues of fluoride. I would like for you to bring us up to date, what is current and relevant, to make a case about fluoride and what you feel is the standard of science that should be enough to convince people that they shouldn't have this substance in their diets or their water supply.
Well, the first thing, Gary, is, and I'm going to be giving references because people might say, well, who is this person? He's just drawing this out of thin air. But I'll be giving references on each one of the statements I made. No one, I don't believe, would purposely add arsenic to their water supply. And no one would purposely add lead to their water supply. But we add fluoride to the water supply. And the fact is, fluoride is more toxic than lead and just slightly less toxic than arsenic. And this a person can pick up. They can pick up the Clinical Toxicology of Commercial Products, 5th edition by Goslin Smith, Hodge, and Braddock. It's published by Williams and Wilkins, and it will tell them exactly that. So the first thing is, you don't want to put toxic substances into your water supply. Now, why is fluoride added to the water supply at all? The claim is that fluoride is supposed to dramatically reduce tooth decay. That's the only reason. It's not put in there, as some people might not expect, it's not put in there to purify the water. Well, as a matter of fact, in the largest study on fluoridation and tooth decay ever done in the history of the country, it was found there was no difference in tooth decay rates in children aged 5 to 17 from 84 areas around the country, a third of which were fluoridated, a third of which were partially fluoridated, and a third of which were not fluoridated at all. That's in the United States. And by the way, there are more people drinking fluoridated water in the United States than any other country in the world. So it makes us an excellent experimental ground. Now, I can cite a paper that I published in the journal Fluoride entitled on the tooth decay, and basically what we did was we looked at every single age group, not a bit of difference in tooth decay in any single age group. That was published in the journal Fluoride in 1990, and again, if people want the references to this, they can have it. But even Dr. A.S. Gray, who was a promoter of fluoridation for the longest time, again, looked at tooth decay in relatively non-fluoridated British Columbia and compared it with the more fluoridated areas of the province, and I'm quoting right from the paper. Survey results in British Columbia, where only 11% of the population used fluoridated water, show lower average tooth decay rates than provinces with 40 to 70% of the population drinking fluoridated water. This is published in the Canadian Dental Association Journal. Again, this is 1987 in October. These things are well documented. Interestingly enough, when I, in 1979, at the guest of His Worship, the Mayor of Auckland, New Zealand, went there to talk about fluoridation, the person who was the dental officer at the time wouldn't even meet with me. He was a pro-fluoridationist and so forth and didn't want to hear a thing about it. Subsequently, and he was president of the Fluoridation Society of New Zealand, subsequently, he took a worldwide tour, came back and said, you know, because we have all the children up to the age of 12 or 13 being examined for tooth decay.
I just want to ask you to hold your thoughts. I'm Gary Knoll. If you're just joining us, we're talking today on our program about fluoridation. My guest, Dr. John Yamianis, to be joined shortly by Dr. John Lee and Dr. Bill Marcus. Dr. Marcus, by the way, is Senior Scientist Advisor at the Office of Drinking Water at the EPA. And Dr. Yamianis is to explain about the science that challenges fluoride. Please continue with your thoughts, Dr. Yamianis.
Anyhow, so Dr. Colquhoun, in coming back from this whirlwind tour around the country, said, let's take a look at tooth decay in areas that are fluoridated and non-fluoridated in New Zealand. Looking at 60,000 school children, found no difference in tooth decay rate, but did find that in approximately 25% of the children that he examined, there was this disease of the teeth called dental fluorosis. And as a result, he wanted to publish this. He did publish this material, and as a result, was given early retirement. The problem here is we have the facts. The power may not be on our side, but the facts clearly say that fluoridation is a poison, and fluoridation does not reduce tooth decay. And now studies that have been even done by our U.S. Public Health Service show that anywhere from 8 to 51% of the children, and sometimes up to 80% of the children living in what they call optimally fluoridated areas have this disease known as dental fluorosis, and you may see it in your children, the white chalky spots on the teeth that appear there. And in more severe cases, it become yellow, brown, and in the highly naturally fluoridated areas, the teeth actually crumble as a result. These are the first visible symptoms of fluoride poisoning. But at the same time this is occurring, we're doing damage to ligaments, tendons, bones as well. And it's interesting that there are 3 articles since 1990, even in the Journal of the American Medical Association, that have associated now fluoridation in the drinking water with bone damage, hip fractures. The New England Journal of Medicine published an article by the very people who used to use fluoride treatment as a therapy for osteoporosis, now recommending that it actually causes more damage than it does good. Again, we're talking about major scientific journals around the country. The work that was done by Dr. Dean Burke and myself showing a link between fluoridation and cancer got Congress to mandate that the Public Health Service do studies, animal studies, to find out whether or not fluoridation causes cancer. And I'll let Dr. Marcus deal with that because he was at the EPA at the time and will be able, I think, to inform your audience very well about that. We have studies from the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences that shows that fluoride causes genetic damage. Procter & Gamble, the very company that makes Crest toothpaste, did research showing that half the amount of fluoride that is currently added to the water supply in New York City causes genetic damage. Now, if they would be biased anyway, they'd try to cover up the harmful effects. And they did, as a matter of fact, in their paper, try to cover up the harmful effects of fluoride. But the data spoke for themselves. Half the amount of fluoride that's found in the city drinking water in New York City causes genetic damage.
Dr. Yamianis, I'd like for you just to hold your thoughts for a moment. I know that you have a lot more to say on other diseases, and I'd like some of the citations, if you would. If you could just collect those for a moment, so you can give us the actual scientific journal, the volume, and the title of the article. I want people to realize that this is not a conspiratorialist theory. This is good quality science that supports that we should not be drinking fluoridated water. Hold your thoughts. We'll be back to you shortly. You won't hear anything in the interim because I have put you on hold in order to get our other guest up, Dr. John Lee. Dr. John Lee is the author of Natural Progesterone, The Multiple Roles of a Remarkable Hormone. He is very concerned as a physician about fluoride. Welcome to the program, Dr. Lee.
Good morning.
Dr. Lee, let's talk about why you first became interested in fluoride.
Oh, okay. as back in 1972, if you can believe it. I was chairman of an environmental health committee for our local medical society, and the society was asked to state its position on fluoridation.